to protect the innocent.
It's alive.
They told you he was dead.
Brainscan, the ultimate experience in interactive terror. Brainscan is not for the squeamish. You gotta look at the ad at least, man. It's in Fangoria. You know, the one with the popping eyeballs on the cover. It's interactive, dude. You're in the game, man.
It's the most frightening experience you'll ever have the displeasure of coming into contact with.
Senseless violence is not entertainment.
Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Trickster.
Just doesn't make any sense.
I'm back.
Please give me the foot.
Look, I don't have the second disc.
You were described as frightening and strange and weird. Freak came up a couple of times.
Buddies forever. You started this and now you're afraid to finish it just like you're afraid of everything else. Of Kimberly, of Fromberg, of telling your father how sick you are being left alone all the time, of your mother who abandoned you. I'm trying to help you. Game over. You lose.
Hello, this is Caitlin O'Haney, the final girl from He Knows You're Alone, and you're listening to Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome to the future. By the way of 1994, we are covering kind of sci-fi horror slasher mashup, Brainscan. This is episode 305, and we are the Hysteria Continues, and we are delighted to be joined by our longtime friend of the show, Michael Ferrari, aka Meep. Meep, how are you doing? It's been, before we came on air, and full disclosure, because we're covering Brainscan, which is all about kind of tech stuff, we've had a tech nightmare trying to get us all on the line in one go. But we're here, hopefully, unless Trickster comes along and ruins it all for us. But Meep, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Everything is good here.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear it. And are you an uber fan of Brainscan?
I am a fan. You know, it's a movie that, I wanted to say happy anniversary Brainscan. It's the 30th anniversary this year. I think it's April 22nd, so in a couple of weeks, our time right now, we will be celebrating and rejoicing in all that is Brainscan. And I'm glad we could do this celebrate this little anniversary for it.
Excellent. Well, it remains to be seen if we will all be celebrating or not. But always a pleasure to have you on the show. It's been far too long. So, welcome aboard. The good ship Hysteria continues, and let's hope we stay afloat for the rest of the show. Erik, how are you doing?
I want to take communion. But not in my mouth, but down here in my pussy.
She's not well, Father Conrad. Magdalena, please!
That's how I'm doing.
Oh, Erik. So I wasn't going to mention about the image I just posted to the Hysteria Continues Facebook group of the face swap between Toya and Trickster. But look what you made me do. I wasn't going to mention it, but now I've done that.
Yeah, we've already posted it.
Well, yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I'll have my revenge. You'll see.
It's an uncanny resemblance. I'm sure you'll agree.
No, it's
not. Well, I think it's just that red hair, wasn't it? The red hair, the makeup, everything.
Trickster
the theatricality.
Wishes he was Toya.
Well, the Amdram kind of performance, all those kind of things. It just screams Toya to me. But we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But Nathan, I'm more interested in hearing how Nathan is doing.
How rude! How is Nathan more interesting than me?
Well, not you, but the Toya Trickster comparison.
Okay. I'm all right.
Well, we had trouble getting hold of you, didn't we? But we managed to.
Yeah, it was difficult. I think Skype wasn't letting me. It gave me an option to start a call, but I thought all that would do was just ring for y'all.
The screen didn't start pulsating, and you had visions of holding a big chopper.
Yeah, it was insane.
Well, it could happen at any moment. So if you see any flashing lights, turn off your screen immediately. And Joseph, are you looking forward to? Do you have a soft spot for Brainscan?
Well, that remains to be seen.
Of course, playing your cards very close to your chest. I like it. So, well, in time-honoured tradition, let's have a little chat about what we've been watching recently. So, Meep, is there anything you've seen you want to tell us about?
Yeah, I could definitely talk about a few things. Just yesterday for family movie night, we did Morgan Stewart's Coming Home. which is a teen comedy with John Cryer. Now, I know this is a horror podcast, and why am I mentioning Morgan Stewart's Coming Home? It's because it's a teen movie about a guy who's obsessed with horror movies. So John Cryer's character has a bunch of like really cool horror paraphernalia in his room and horror posters. He shares definitely some traits with Edward Furlong in the movie we're going to discuss later, being a horror fan and being obsessed with that sort of thing. So it's kind of fun, and there's a nice little meet cute he has with a girl at the mall. At a George Romero signing for for his book in the 80s. I think it was shot in the mid 80s, 1985. It's a really cute movie. The kids really enjoyed it. They're at the age now where they can start watching more of these teen comedies and even teen horror movies. And I eventually will show them Brainscan. But yeah, it was a lot of fun watching that one. And it's always fun seeing yourself a bit on the screen, like seeing someone who's obsessed with, like, say, horror movies or cult movies, genre movies on the screen, because it's so rare that you see that representation, at least these days. So that's nice to have that. And during our trip in DC, we that was another reason why we watched Morgan Stewart, because it's set in DC. But we watched at the hotel. We watched Orphan, the 2009 horror movie about the little girl who terrorizes a family, with a twist, of course. And my daughter was especially interested in watching it and wanting to know why. She spent the whole time, why is she doing this? Why? I'm like, trust me, you'll know it by the end when it's outlandish twist. And she really enjoyed that. She's also a big fan of a movie that's celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. We also watched this in a hotel room.
Oh, it's not Nocturne by Susie and the Banshees, is it?
Well, Uncle Erik, you'll have to show her that. Have her listen to that.
It's a film as well. It's a concert film. Yeah.
There you go. So 40th anniversary of Terminator.
Oh,
I know a movie you guys discussed on this podcast, and it's actually her favorite movie of all time, I think. She's obsessed with the Terminator. She's obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know where she gets that from, possibly me. But yeah, every time that's on, we'll watch it. We're hoping that it's going to be screening in theaters this year for the 40th anniversary, because she has been asking, is that going to be playing in theaters, because she really wants to see it. So that was a lot of fun. Another family movie night. Just before we left, I put on Critters 2, the main course, because it's one of the rare Easter movies. And we watched Critters last year, and they really enjoyed that one, and it was fun just to follow up. I actually saved part 2 for this year, knowing that it would be a good time to play at Easter time. They had a lot of fun with that, and it holds up pretty well. In theaters, I did see just a couple of movies. Immaculate, the new, you could say, Catholic horror movie. There's a couple of them playing now. Immaculate and The First Omen, and I was actually kind of surprised by Immaculate. I was really entertained by it. It's definitely a slow burn, but once it gets going in that last half, it kind of doesn't stop until the end of the movie, which is really exciting and fun. Sydney Sweeney was a pretty good lead, had good vibes, had a good atmosphere. So a nice, neat 90-minute horror movie it's not quite exactly what you think it's going to be going in, which is nice. There's a nice little twist to it. And it shares some, let's say, DNA with a certain John Carpenter movie from the 80s, but I won't say which one, which will give it away. But I had a lot of fun with it, surprisingly. I had, low expectations, given that a lot of these nun kind of movies in the last decade have been pretty lame. But this one, actually, it was pretty entertaining and fun. And then we did go see as a family the new Ghostbusters movie, I guess, which is horror related. And it was not a good movie. And I don't know. I just felt it was a big letdown from some of the other Ghostbusters movies, particularly the first two, where the emphasis is on comedy and just having fun set pieces. This was kind of loud, Not much comedy at all, which was weird. And then it borrowed a plot right out of the movie Casper from 1995 with Christina Ricci. Kind of stole that plot from that, which is really bizarre. So it was kind of like kind of a meh kind of movie. A genre movie that did come out I wanted to give a little bit of love to is Love Lies Bleeding, which is a kind of a noirish, very pulpish movie with Kristen Stewart. It has some really dark themes to it, which I think is fitting for this podcast. And it was really well done, and Kristen Stewart was phenomenal in it. So I just wanted to give it a little bit of love in this podcast.
I love the ending to that movie, by the way. It's so bizarre.
It goes to another level which you're not expecting, but actually completely works strangely. Like,
I love the movie. Yeah, I saw it too. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I love, Kristen Stewart got a lot of flack a while back there for all the Twilight stuff, and I think she may or may not have had some personal issues, but I love her. I think she's fantastic.
I think she's embracing who she is, and she really understands how to just really command the screen. And she's like, there's a scene early in this movie where she first sees the object of her desire in this movie, and it's just like, it's just so, just the expressions on her face and the way she just like kind of takes it all in, just kind of a really well done performance. And she's always been a good actress, but I feel like she's really she really gets to be who she wants to be now on a screen, and within a genre movie, because it is pretty much could you say it's like even like a 90s neo-noir. It has those vibes. It's set in 1989, but it feels much more like
period detail is really good too.
Yeah, they get a lot of it right, but doesn't hit you over the head. It has a really good villain who's believable with Ed Harris, and it's just really good pulpy neo-noir, which I kind of miss, and this was a really well done one. And then lastly, Aliens, the new 4K came out of the James Cameron film. I watched that with my son, and I had very fond memories of going to see that in the theater as a double feature with The Fly in 1986 with my family as a 10 o'clock p.m. showing, a double feature showing. And that was kind of a highlight of me being 11. My son's, he's going on 12. So I thought it was a good time to introduce him to Aliens and The Fly this year. And he loved both. And Aliens, this is really well done. And a lot's been said about it. And has a lot of horror. It's definitely a horror movie as well as being a really good sci-fi and war movie. So it has a lot going on in it, and lots been said about Aliens. But good times. Some pretty good movies lately, which is great.
Excellent. I've heard a lot of good things about Immaculate. So also is it Love Lies Bleeding?
You should see that movie, Justin. It really is great.
Yeah. Well, when I get home, I'm at my family's at the moment, so in the UK. So when I get home, they've got a long list of films I need to catch up on. So excellent. Well, thank you, Meep. Lots of good stuff there. So Joseph, you've seen a couple of those as well, haven't you, by the sound of it?
Yeah, I saw The Love Lies Bleeding, which I really, really enjoyed. I actually saw last night Dark Harvest from last year, I think it was, which... did any of you guys see this or mention it previously on an episode? I don't remember.
Is it? I have seen it. I've heard some good things about it, and I heard it was Is it kind of slasher adjacent or not? Is it more of a monster movie?
It's more of a monster movie, and I'll get into that. But this one's about a small town in the late 1950s or early 1960s, I think it was, where this supernatural scarecrow named Sawtooth Jack basically manifests on Halloween every year. And the town's teenagers are kind of, I guess for vague mumbo-jumbo reasons, they're tasked yearly with stopping it dead in its tracks before it reaches the town church. And they've kind of made like a battle royale style game of it called The Run. And basically the winner and his or her family is essentially gifted new cars, new houses, money. And for the teenager who stops Sawtooth dead in his tracks, he gets a new car and a pass to leave town for good. So there's something nefarious going on keeping people in the town. But this one wasn't bad. It had excellent cinematography, lots of good gooey gore effects, great monster design. The period detail was immaculate. And, like I said, that creature design of Sawtooth Jack is, straight out of kind of Lovecraft almost. But I think the problem, like a lot of the newer movies, is I just didn't really care enough about the characters to be invested in what they go through. It also hits a few kind of expected notes without much obfuscation plot-wise. And so the finale kind of feels humdrum if you take that into account. But I will recommend it as a curiosity. I mean, it's got a really unique story, which I think may have been based on a novel or some such. And like I said, the period detail really calls to mind something like, maybe like The Outsiders meets Pumpkinhead. I mean, that's what this movie is essentially. So it's a good one-time watch, but I wasn't bowled over by it or anything.
Okay. I've not, anyone else seen that?
No,
I saw it pop up, but excellent. Well, anything else, Joseph?
Yeah, just one more. And since Meep mentioned a teen comedy, I will mention a new action movie. And that's the Roadhouse remake, which I only mention because I adore the OG film. And we always... What?
No, I've nothing wrong with Roadhouse. It's just the Roadhouse remake has possibly the most despicable person in the universe in it.
Are you talking about Conor McGregor?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't particularly care for him. But we always talk about kind of quote-unquote bad movies. And since I love the OG film so much, I kind of caved and watched this one. This one's okay. I mean, it's definitely not as campy as the original, and it's sort of modernized for that UFC crowd. But I thought Jake Gyllenhaal standing in for Patrick Swayze was pretty good, and there's some real laugh-out-loud moments that really worked well. And the film takes a kind of dark turn with Gyllenhaal's character of his iteration of the Dalton character that I didn't really expect. So it's a decent one-time watch, but I'll probably never see it again, while I will most definitely see the OG film again.
Did the bad guy tell Jake Gyllenhaal that he used to fuck guys like you in prison?
No, unfortunately, he did not.
Boo.
Yeah, and it's Conor McGregor is the bad guy, and I'll admit he was kind of fun to watch, but as a person, I don't like him. But it's okay for a one-time watch.
Okay, well, thank you. And Erik, what have you seen? Do you want to tell us about?
Nothing horror-wise, but seeing as me mentioned the Aliens 4K Blu-ray, I picked up the True Lies 4K Blu-ray. I want to pick up the Abyss one, but it isn't getting a release in the UK and Ireland because James Cameron will not allow them to cut the film. They need to cut the scene where the rat is submerged in the pink underwater breathing fluid. And James Cameron said no, so it's not getting a release. So I have to import it from the States, but the supply is really, really, really scarce over there for some reason. Like, it's never in stock on Amazon. In Canada or in the States, so I'm just going to have to bide my time and wait for that one. But I did watch True Lies. Now, there's a huge controversy over this trio of 4K remastered releases that James Cameron has supervised. People are saying he's just overprocessed everything and all the film grain is gone. Everyone looks waxy and unrealistic. I don't really have a problem with that type of stuff at all. I mean, it does look very, very kind of slick and very, very sharp, but that's not a problem for me. I'm sure that the film purists have an issue with it. The film True Lies itself, I remember seeing in the cinema and thinking it was great fun. I haven't seen it in a very long time because I don't think it's actually had much of a release history in the digital era, but I thought it was great fun. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis is brilliant in it.
Oh my God.
What?
No, I was just talking about Jamie Lee Curtis, the dance scene. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, which is
sorry,
so funny.
That's the red-blooded hetero in me. Just
yes. Well, she does a great job of going from sort of mousy housewife to undercover spy, sexy underwear lady.
So sexy.
Yeah, and the great helicopter stunt and everything, and so it's just lots of fun. It's like it's Bond movie. It's like Bond movie with the comedy maybe dialed up slightly more, and certainly it's far superior to any of the recent Bond movies, in my opinion, which take themselves too seriously. So I'm a huge fan of True Lies. On the extras front, disappointing. There's really only kind of a really good 45-minute documentary about the making of the film, but there's nothing else on it. But hey ho, I'm still waiting for The Abyss to come in because that's my favorite James Cameron movie, and I'm dying to see it on Blu-ray because I think this is well, certainly in North America, it's its first Blu-ray outing, as far as I know. So I'm dying to see it.
Okay, well, thank you, Eric. Is that everything?
That's everything.
Okay, Nathan, how about you?
The only thing I watched recently is I watched that movie Lisa Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Diablo Cody, isn't it? Yeah.
I wanted to like this movie so much more than I did. It started out great. Like, I loved the beginning and up until about the halfway mark. And then I felt like after the halfway mark, it just kind of ran out of steam, and it just went in a direction that I didn't find as entertaining or anything as I did the first half. So, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't like it, mainly just that I didn't like the direction it ended up taking. I was kind of hoping for maybe something a little more lighthearted along the lines of My Boyfriend's Back, which I love, by the way. But it's not, quite like that. It's its own movie, of course. But overall, I was just kind of meh on it, I'm afraid. Have you guys seen it?
Not yet, no.
I really actually enjoyed it up until the very end, which felt like a reshoot or something kind of thrown in at the end. It didn't quite make sense with the rest of the movie. But up until then, I thought it was actually a really fun kind of modern take on, it's set in 1989. It has good period detail and all that, but it's maybe a more modern version of like My Boyfriend's Back, like you mentioned, which I am a huge fan of, and I think is a wonderful film and heartwarming and funny. This one is funny too, and I really liked its lead character and kind of the places it was trying to go to and went to in some spots. But that very end, kind of, if I could take that off, that tacked on ending, I thought it was actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. It's not. I mean, I didn't hate it. I don't know. I felt like I didn't find the lead to be a very likable character. I did at first. But then as the movie goes on, I felt like she got more and more unlikable as the film went on. Until by the end, I was like, y'all can kill her. That's okay. I'm all right with that. But anyway, no, I mean, it's definitely worth a watch, I'd say.
Excellent. Anything else, Nathan?
No, that was it for me this time.
Okay, I've just got a couple of, I'll just, one thing. There's a few new films I'm reviewing for Hysteria Lives, which I haven't had a chance to post yet. One of them is a film that I don't think we covered on the podcast, but it certainly is kind of due for reappraisal, is Happy Hell Night from 1992, which is the bizarro dorm co-ed slasher sort of mixed up with kind of Satanism and black magic, with the quipping killer priest, which is, I hadn't seen it for a long while, but I watched the Blu-ray 88 Films put out some time ago, and it has the really creepy looking priest with the black eyes who's been locked away in an asylum, and two frat boys accidentally let him loose as part of a frat pledge. And then he goes on the loose and starts killing co-eds with a ice pick. So it's kind of I was rewatching it again. It's kind of like a mega mix of 80s slasher cliches. And it was a film that was made by, or financed by Yugoslavian producers. It was almost, they sat down and watched all the kind of like a 24-hour marathon of North American slasher movies and decided to make one in 1991 or whenever it was produced. So it kind of felt a little bit out of time, but that was, but it was still kind of, it's got its quirky charms. It also obviously was kind of nodding to Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger with this. They took this very creepy looking priest played by, I think it's Charles Cragen, who happened to be, I think he's in True Lies as well, but he kind of looks really, really creepy, but he makes really, really bad puns. A bit like kind of, if you imagine like just firing kind of Eric's joke of the weeks throughout a movie, it's kind of like that. And so it's kind of a weird mixture. And then by the end of the movie, it kind of turns into kind of Euro horror, sort of kind of everything but a kitchen sink kind of Euro horror, kind of Satanism, black magic kind of thing going on. So yeah, it's a weird mixture, but it's quite interesting. It's got an appearance, or more of a cameo really, by Sam Rockwell, who went on to be quite a career later on, and also Darren McGavin, who looks incredibly embarrassed to be in it. But yeah, so I take it you guys have all seen Happy Hell Night at some point.
A long time ago.
It'll be a fun one for us to cover on the show at some point. So anyway, there's a couple of others, but I'll leave those for another day. So, Erik, what do we have in the way of do we have a trailer for Brainscan or a TV spot?
I got a TV spot for it, yeah, because I've got a wide release in the US.
Yeah, okay. Well, after this, you'll bring us in and tell us all about Brainscan from 1994.
Do not adjust your set.
You're in the game, man.
Brainscan is in control.
Play it, Michael.
Brainscan, the ultimate experience in interactive terror. Rated R at theaters April 22nd.
When Michael, a lonely teenager, orders the latest interactive video game, the new high-tech wizardry penetrates his subconscious, or misses, where his darkest impulses lead him through a deadly maze of murder, deception, and desire. Pursued by a homicide detective and prodded by the trickster, as they say here on the cover, who looks like Susie and doesn't look like Toya.
Oh, Erik.
This is what it says on the cover on the Blu-ray, Justin.
What, despite, I don't think Susie ever had like bright orange hair.
No, but this is what it says on the Blu-ray. I'm not making it up.
Oh, my goodness.
Prodded by the trickster who materializes into his room, Michael is torn between the worlds of good and evil, of reality and fantasy, and ultimately, life and death. And P.S., the trickster doesn't look like Toya. That's what it says.
Is that what it says? Okay.
That's what it says, yeah. Just to preempt anything you might have to say later in the podcast. Okay, so this is the film. I don't think I saw Brainscan when it came out. I think it could have been in the noughties, the 2000s, when I finally caught up with this film. But this film couldn't be more 90s if it tried, and it's kind of its USP for me is the fact that it's so dated and it has that kind of time capsule element to it, which makes it kind of fun, which works in its favor for me because I don't think as a horror film itself it's okay for me. That's about as generous as I can be. The plot involves Edward Furlong's character of Michael playing this CD-ROM computer game that sort of makes you hallucinate or enter this virtual reality scenario. So it kind of felt a bit like, and it predates David Cronenberg's Existenz, which to me is a much better film, but this kind of does the same type of thing with it, and it followed in the wake of other kind of virtual reality infused films like Lawnmower Man, for instance. I thought Brainscan was a better film than Lawnmower Man, as it had a firmer grasp of its own internal logic, I thought. The Edward Furlong character, he seems... I think he's supposed to be really sympathetic, which I suppose he is to a degree, but in the opening scene we see him ogling his neighbour who's taking her bra off, and we're like, you're a bit pervy, really. And also, I know Edward Furlong gets a lot of flack. He's not the greatest actor in the world. He's not Sir Ian McKellen. I think he's fine. I thought he was good in Terminator 2. I remember him being quite good in the film Pecker that John Waters made in the late 90s. In this, he's okay. I mean, he's a bit one note, but he's not awful, as I've read, because I've read some criticism of him in this film saying that he's, horrendously bad. I don't think he is. But his character, I don't think, generates a huge amount of sympathy. Considering he has, his mother was killed in a car accident. He has this permanent limp from injuries that he sustained in that accident. But anyway, any film that features the latest high tech as it at the core of its plot is at risk of dating the film, and that's certainly the case here, because you have CD-ROMs, you've got dial-up modems, you've got CRT monitors, you got 16-bit graphics, and then you've got Edward Furlong as well with his baggy clothes and his floppy fringe, which, yes, Joseph, I did have that kind of haircut in 1992-ish. But as I said, I was trying to look like Brett Anderson from Suede, not Edward Furlong from Brainscan. But I ended up looking like neither. I ended up looking like Sebastian from Little Britain when people look at pictures of me from that era. And that's not...
Why did you decide to call me out on this? I don't know what you're talking about.
Because you were mentioning it yesterday on Messenger.
I know. I'm just ribbing you, Erik.
Yeah.
for your pleasure.
Yeah. I did love the bitchy character in this called Stacy, I think is her name. And she's only in the movie quite, briefly in a couple of scenes, but she dresses exactly like Dolores O'Riordan from The Cranberries. And, she looks like she's at a 90s fancy dress party or something. It just makes me chuckle every time she's on the screen. Trickster is another issue I have with the film. I just don't find him to be that interesting. I find him kind of bland. I mean, I kind of like his look, which, as I said, is like Susie. I think they actually based it on Susie, didn't they, Justin?
Eric, really? I think anyone looking at Trickster will know exactly who they modelled it on.
Actually, I think he looks more like Tina Turner. No? Okay. But he reminded me, do you know who he reminded me most of was Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons, because he doesn't do any of the killing, which I think is meant to be the point of the character, but he doesn't have any kind of threat element to him, and he's not sort of frightening. And you can sort of see the machinery in the background of whoever's writing the script saying, okay, I'm going to create this supernatural villain who's going to become a big franchise star, and we're going to be the Nightmare on Elm Street of the 1990s, which didn't ultimately happen. It's kind of the same feeling I got when I watch Shocker. And oh my God, can you hear the rain outside my window?
You started talking about Tina Turner, weren't you?
Oh yeah, that's Can't Stand the Rain against my window. Yeah, I was wondering what that noise. I could hear this noise in the background. It's absolutely torrential, and I've got to go out in it in an hour. Hooray! So yeah, I was getting the same thing when I watched things like The Horror Show and Shocker, that they were just trying to force a franchise onto us, and that's the way I feel with Brainscan and Trickster. I thought that the opening murder in the film, which, and you mentioned this, Joseph, earlier in the week when we were chatting, that there's a POV sequence where Michael's character is going around like as if you're playing a video game, and you see him picking up a knife and going into this guy's bedroom and stabbing him and chopping off his foot. And that's really, really well done. It's really quite an effective, and there's an intensity to that scene that isn't really replicated in anything else in the rest of the film, because everything seems to happen off screen then. So for me, I read a lot of the comments on IMDb about what people thought of the film, and a lot of people said the same thing, that I saw this in 1994 when I was 10 years old, and it has a huge nostalgia value for me now. Whereas in 1994 I was 20, and I didn't even see Brainscan back then. It was about 10 years later probably, so it has no nostalgia value for me. I just found it a bit vanilla, I suppose. So kind of a 6 out of 10 movie for me, I think. I mean, I love the 90s look. I love how dated it is, and I think there's a couple of good sequences in there. Trickster, I don't think, is the most effective horror villain in the world, but that's my tuppence. Anyway, Meep, you're a bigger fan of this movie. I'm assuming you saw this when it came out in the 90s.
I did. Actually, I'm holding the movie stub for Brainscan. I saw it at the Lowe's Oriental Theater in Brooklyn, New York. I wrote down what I thought of the movies back then. I gave them reviews or ratings at least. And I gave it 3.5 stars back in April of 1994.
Out of 5?
Out of 5, yeah, you would say. And I was a big fan of it. I thought it was very entertaining. Looking back at these movies now, and I just do gravitate towards these 90s technology-driven movies. Yes, they're dated, of course, and the technology, we're way past the technology. And a lot of times in these movies, the technology was over by the time the movie came out.
Like us using Skype.
Yes. So this one has some themes in it, though, that seem to have held up over the years for me, at least. And that need to disconnect from reality, which we all are guilty of these days with social media and other outlets. And it was right there back in the 90s. A lot of other movies were doing it as well, some in pretty silly ways. And this one definitely goes that route with the silliness that you can do with the technology of the time. But I still think its underlying themes of a character who can't deal with his reality is, he has a lot of feeling of loss in his life. Michael, of course, I had to gravitate towards a Michael movie for some reason, because he's trying to fill it, and he's filling it, and his dad is trying to fill it for him. His very absent father, who's never in the movie, just a voice on an answering machine, because his mother died in a horrible car accident, and he was, of course, injured by it, and so he has all these things, he has all these possessions, he has everything he needs, but he has essentially no parents, no structure in his life. And so he often turns to video games, Fangoria magazine, VHS tapes of horror movies, and just that kind of need to fill his teenage life is what we did back then too, and we still do it now, and to some degree. And I find a lot of those themes that it's trying to instill into this film pretty relatable and kind of honest, even if it's filled in a movie where they're trying to build also at the same time a franchise film, like you mentioned, with the possible Freddy character. His fingernails are a bit much, a little too on the nose with what they're trying to do with that character, but I still think, beyond all of that, I think the themes are there, and they work for me. I in some ways, I like to look at it as a cross between a Freddy movie and an A24 movie, like a Talk to Me or something, which was a more recent film where you kind of play with the dark side, because there was something about going to those places that some of us, we gravitate towards it, and we try to stay away because we know that there are places that we don't want to end up, and they might suck us in and take us away from our lives, take away our lives. And Michael, throughout this movie, he gets sucked in, and he does. He thinks he's playing a video game, but then he commits a murder, which leads to having to cover up the murder, which leads to another murder. And that kind of stuff is, that kind of storytelling has been done many times throughout film history. And you could even see it in the origins of like a djinn or a genie story, where someone is really tricking you into just making mistakes. And that's what Michael does throughout this film. He's a teenage character. And that's another reason why I like this film. It's a teen horror movie. I do gravitate towards teen horror movies. So you take the teen horror movie, you take the technology part of it, which I have a lot of fun with, and mix them together, and it makes for a fun movie. Some of the kills, like the initial kill, like you mentioned, is pretty gruesome. The POV shots definitely add to that atmosphere and tension. With that, and how that builds in that first kill scene, and the subsequent kills don't really work as much because a lot of them are off screen, or just not quite. And there's not quite enough of them, which kind of gives it a bit of a tame feeling, which is maybe a gripe that people have with the film. It's kind of more of a PG-13 horror movie after that first kill, and I concur with that. I definitely think there could have been more to it with that. But and there's also the element of the Frank Langella character, who's the cop who's onto him or suspicious of him, and then eventually onto him, and then where it goes later in the film. I'm not quite a fan of that stuff, where it focuses, it shifts point of views to the Frank Langella and the mob of the town, and some rando guy gets shot by accident. I'm like, this movie doesn't really need that. It should just focus on Michael and maybe just having that hint of the police being suspicious of him.
Well, I just wanted to say real quick, considering what they did with the ending, that stuff never should have happened. I mean, he was not a witness to any of that.
Yeah, it does kind of feel a little shoehorned in there to make maybe Michael seem a little more, I don't know, sympathetic or something. I'm not sure why they were going with that, but those themes, like I mentioned, they do. This movie does share some themes with another Edward Furlong movie of Pet Sematary 2, another movie where he's Edward Furlong is grieving over his mom and then gets tempted by the dark side. Though I think he's actually pretty good in that movie. I think he did a pretty good job of being. You can see his change and switch over to the dark side of that one. I think he did a good job of portraying that. Here, not so much. I think he does feel like a teenager just caught up in something. Who drinks a lot of milk, screams a lot when he wakes up from his video game. But I like that stuff too at the same time, even if I have some grievances with some of the performance. But it was written by Andrew Kevin Walker, who made some other fun movies, and we'll get into that stuff later of the behind the scenes. But he did another movie called Hideaway from 1995, which is another kind of movie that goes into a little bit of a technology kind of thing, which I like as well. I think that that may have been the same director as The Lawnmower Man. So there's something in the air in this mid 90s kind of field that I seem to enjoy a lot. I also find that it's fun seeing teen horror movies set in the suburbs. In this case, it's supposed to be suburban New Jersey,
which is where you're from, isn't it?
It is. It's a made-up town called Montview, but I believe it's supposed to be a variation of Montclair, which is literally one town over from where I live now. I think switching there would have been a good vibe having it shot in Montclair, which is very kind of like idyllic New Jersey suburbs as you'd imagine it would be. But I think giving it this Canadian cold vibe this movie has, along with the quite wonderful electronic score, really elevates some of the visuals and look of the feel of the movie to me. I think that's where the movie's strength is, with the visuals and the score by I think George S. Clinton rather. I really like the theme that plays pretty much throughout the movie. I think it really is kind of haunting and stays with you, and adds a great vibe to the film. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I have more to say, especially certain scenes, but I want to pass it over to whoever's next.
Okay. Yeah, I do like the score as well, I have to say. Apart from the sort of needle drops for the music, which isn't my cup of tea at all, but the actual score itself I thought was quite effective. Mate, before we pass it over to Justin, is New Jersey anywhere near Old Sweater?
Dear, if my soundboard was working. If only.
Well, Justin, what did you think of Susie and her appearance in Brainscan?
Well, first of all, I don't want to reiterate beat a dead horse, but I will talk about one. So Toya it's clearly Toya. But anyway, our listeners have probably had enough of this rivalry for now. So I will talk about something else, which one thing I wanted to mention, just as an aside, do any of you remember the video game Atmosphere?
No. Oh, was it a board game and a video game?
Yes, it was exactly that. It was spelled Atmosphere, but as in F-E-A-R. And it was released. It was a board game, but it was an interactive board game where you had before the DVD, you had a video cassette that it would tell you where to fast forward or rewind to, and you would have whatever the Crypt Keeper, whatever it was, telling you you're going to die or whatever. So it was it was released in 1991, so a few years before Brainscan, but it shows what the reality was really for interactive video games or kind of interactive board games were back then. Brainscan, this for me, it was the first time watch. I kind of guess I'm a bit too old to have been a target audience for this when it came out. I would have been in my mid-20s. So also, I'm not even sure. Did this get a video cinema release in UK?
I had a look around. I couldn't see any evidence it did.
No, because I know, I mean, we could talk about it in the background, but I know it was a bit of a disaster and it got pulled from cinemas in the US after a couple of weeks from what I've seen. So that may have, back then, films tended not to get a UK release until about 6 months after the North American release, which may explain, obviously, why films that bombed at the American box office didn't get released overseas. But I guess it probably did come out on video. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it to some degree. I mean, I'm not like you, Erik. I have no history with this movie, so I have no nostalgia factor for it. So it kind of didn't really stand. It felt very much like an amalgamation of many other movies, wrapped up in that kind of, at the time, that kind of fresh technological innovation, I kind of guess, of where people thought maybe video games would go in the future, which arguably I don't think, it almost felt more like they were riffing off something like Videodrome, that whole idea of you kind of watching something and becoming part of it, and that kind of slightly, I think you mentioned, Erik, or maybe it was you and me, but slightly Cronenberg kind of feel to it. But I don't think it really did anything particularly interesting with it necessarily. Having said that, I mean, it's a fun ride. I think Edward Furlong in Terminator 2, his character in that worked better as this kind of slightly bratty but ultimately scared teenager. In this, he doesn't come across particularly likable even in the beginning. He becomes as a bit kind of shot worn for a 15-year-old, a bit world weary even for somebody that age. So it was difficult to warm to the character. The Trickster was I very much something you would more likely you would seen in an 80s movie like Trick or Treats, where the long shadow of Freddy Krueger was definitely hanging over this to some degree, and it reminded me of the drill killer in Slumber Party Massacre 2 as well, kind of an amalgamation of all of those. I mean, some of the takeaways I took from it was, one of the things, if you kind of took a shot every time someone said dude or man, you'd be under the table very quickly, and it kind of laser focus itself to the time period with all that kind of grunge constantly playing in the background at the kind of party that was taking place, during all these kind of hallucinations. I thought it was strange. First of all, I was thinking, is this a slasher movie? And then you had that first kind of point of view murder sequence, and I was thinking, well, this is definitely falling into slasher movie territory. Although I do wonder how easy it is to cut off someone's foot with a knife. I've never tried it, but I don't know if it's that easy. But anyway, the movie then veers away very much, kind of away from the slasher movie almost in entirety. And I think I read somewhere that they had planned to film some of the murder sequences, and they decided not to. I don't know if that's to get a lower rating or whatever. And some of the things are kind of aged in some ways. It's like the character, Edward Furlong kind of spying on the teenage Kimberly is something that arguably you wouldn't see in a movie today. And it also had this kind of weird kind of disconnect. All the other characters, Edward Furlong was 15 when he made this, and everyone else was in their 70s by the look of it.
That's a bit harsh.
All right. His best friend was played, I think he was 26 or 27 when he made this. And I think the actress, is Amy Hargreaves, was 24. But in some scenes, she looked old enough to his mother. So it was kind of this weird, slightly kind of weird thing going on with it, which it was a bit odd. The other takeaway for me with this was that it kind of to be one of those movies that was written by somebody who perhaps thought the horror movies weren't good for teenagers. There's a certain subsect of horror movies where they kind of paint the picture that horror movies themselves corrupt. And there's something going on in Brainscan as well, whereas you've got Edward Furlong, who literally has a noose hanging in his bedroom. He has this massive kind of den bedroom kind of thing, and all these horror movie posters and have a horror movie club, but he gets pulled into the dark world of snuff and murder through his love of horror. And it seems to be this kind of thing which is kind of shot through a lot of 80s horror movies as well. This kind of weird, slightly conservative streak politically. And I may be just overanalyzing it a bit too much, but it seems to be running through this a bit as well, that his love of horror has kind of essentially kickstarted this kind of murder spree, and he's been implicated by it. So overall, I thought it was okay. It's not something I'd necessarily want to kind of watch again. But I had a certain 90s charm. I mean, the other thing that, of course, dates it, and it's something we talked about before in early 90s horror movies and sci-fi, is the CGI. So the scene at the end when he's directed to kill Kimberly by the Trickster, and then the Trickster, when he doesn't, the Trickster turns up and they start morphing into each other. It would have probably worked better with kind of practical special effects, perhaps, kind of along the kind of things you might have seen in the Carpenter's The Thing, whereas they use this kind of proto-CGI, which to modern eyes looks very hokey, a bit like the Alien in Alien 3.
Well, they did actually They did actually shoot a sequence that didn't make the final cut of Edward Furlong and Trickster merged together, kind of like an effect from John Carpenter's The Thing. But they scrapped it. I'm not sure why they did.
Yeah, I did. I read about that and I was surprised because I thought it was actually, that was probably the most interesting part of the movie. That whole kind of, if it had been done a bit better, more convincingly, I think it would have kind of, you would have got some body horror jolts from it. But the CGI was so kind of hokey and of its time, it just immediately threw me out of the moment, I kind of guess. But yeah, overall, I mean, I'm glad I've seen it. But it's not, it's a bit of a meh for me, if I'm honest. So, that's my tuppence.
Okay, cool. Joseph, what are your thoughts?
There's a couple of things Brainscan does really, really well. The best being that scene with Edward Furlong's character of Michael playing disc 1 of the title game, where, like you said, he's essentially guided by the disembodied voice of Trickster to commit this brutal murder. And this sequence is pure slasher movie POV, done really well. You have the kind of double punch of Olds, the beginning, playing over the soundtrack as Michael makes his way into a stranger's house and he retrieves the weapon. He goes up the stairs and he finds the stranger sleeping in his bed and he kills him in brutal fashion. And then the song kind of crosses over into Olds 2 of Me, and it underscores all the violence in the scene. I really love this scene. I think it's so well done. It's really sort of techno-operatic and sets the stage for, what should be a fun thrill ride. Elsewhere we have T. Ryder Smith as Trickster, and I think he's a lot of fun to watch, honestly. And there's more on him later. And I had and probably still have a huge crush on Amy Hargreaves, which might sound creepy coming from a man who's pushing 50, but she was in her mid-20s at the time of filming. So I can say that, with some dignity, I guess. But man, if ever a movie needed a swift kick in the pants, it's Brainscan. I mean, that POV sequence promises so much that the rest can't possibly live up to, even if it tried, which I don't think it does. Just about everyone, barring T. Ryder Smith, is either miscast or lethargic, especially Edward Furlong's character, whose 2 modes of acting seems to be screaming until his voice cracks or looking withdrawn. I thought the best friend character of Kyle was a much livelier presence, though I did sort of appreciate the friendship the two share. I mean, they're kind of both written as likable, and I like that there was this sort of, it's like this innocence between the two where, rather than speaking the usual movie teenager lingo about sex or babes or both, they seem to be codependent to one another on the basis of maintaining this childlike friendship. I mean, you have the affirmations of buddies forever, and then late night phone calls about video games and horror movies, that sort of thing. And I really admired that. As I was talking about T. Ryder Smith as Trickster, I'm sure he's a character to divide opinions, but, whatever you may think of him, he's the only one here who seems to be having any fun whatsoever. And I love his line where he says, "No country western music, please. Every man has his limits." And I totally agree with him there. He's like this kind of like...
Not a fan of the new Beyonce album then, no?
No. not a fan of any of her albums, if I'm honest. But that's neither here nor there. To me, visually, he's like this 3-way amalgam of like Rawhead Rex, Yahoo Serious, and Alice Cooper.
Yahoo Serious is a name I have not heard in about 35 years.
He has that same hairstyle.
Yeah.
And I think the smart play here was not to make him a wisecracking kind of quipster to kind of match his ghoulish presence. Rather, he speaks in absolutes with this kind of upper crust inflection and cadence. And when he's asked to kind of go over the top, he does give it his all, but he does it without breaking character because we essentially find out he's more or less this repressed dark side of the Michael character. So he hones in on that repression aspect very well. And I think that was the point of the character overall. For me personally, I think he's the definite standout, at least as far as, energetic performance is concerned with this movie. But, ultimately, even the good the film does, and I admit it does some, it just can't quite lift this one out of the kind of, I don't know, it's the pits maybe. It's just so lethargic and almost morose. like I said, everyone plays this kind of like they're in a morality tale on the dangers of technology rather than the campy horror film in which they're supposed to be. And so the tone is all over the place, I think. It's also a little too safe, like Justin said, for its own good. It kind of limps to a conclusion that is very mundane, though I guess it is kind of inevitable, but it's very mundane still, I suppose. Though I did love the final credits coda with the dog. I thought that was a nice touch of Schadenfreude, if not exactly a horrific ending that the movie could have used. But I also think the soundtrack is pretty decent. I mean, you've got Pitch Shifter playing Triad. You've got that double dose of Old when Michael makes his first kill. You got Primus's Welcome to This World, which I was so mad that Michael cut that song off just as it was about to begin. All bangers as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, this one's a close call for me. There's enough here to give it a marginal passing grade. I just wish it was a little livelier and maybe not as cut and dried safe, and maybe recast the lead. So, decent, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Edward Furlong was, I suppose, hot property in terms of this type of movie back in this era. You're targeting a teenage audience. He's just come off Terminator 2 and Pet Sematary 2, which I thought was quite good. Nathan, you're going to love Brainscan. I can feel it in my bones. Maybe not.
I don't know if anybody knows this or if you guys know this, but I'm not the biggest sci-fi fan.
But you do know that Brainscan's not a science fiction film.
It feels like it. It feels sci-fi-ish to me. Now, on the other hand, Chopping Mall kind of felt sci-fi to me, and I loved it. So
would the Brainscan have won you over? It had a few more exploding heads.
Exploding heads and maybe people trapped in an enclosed location, like a big mansion, and the trickster was killing them off one by one. Oh, then I would be all about the movie. For me, it's just one of those films where everything in the film to me is 5 out of 10. It's like the movie to me is in general a 5 out of 10. Like, it's not bad enough to be entertaining to me in the way that, say, Splatter You or Don't Go in the Woods, Nail Gun Massacre. It's a technically well-made movie, but I wasn't very engaged in the storyline necessarily. And so I don't know. Like I said, it just kind of falls in this weird middle realm where, I mean, and I'm sorry to fans of the film, but it's ultimately, I think, a forgettable film for me. Like, I feel like after a while, if somebody mentions it, I'll probably barely remember it. Just because nothing in the movie really stuck out. Not even the trickster, to be honest. I mean, I liked him, but I don't know. Even he wasn't as crazy and outlandish as I was hoping for. So, I mean, and again, it's not a bad movie or anything. I mean, I like to just say, like, it's kind of like if I were to review, say, a Western. It's not my kind of movie. So I'm like, I don't feel I'm being necessarily fair when I review, because I'm kind of going into it with already a notion that I don't like these kind of films usually anyway. So, yeah, I mean, in general, Brainscan, as I said, 5 out of 10. I didn't think it was necessarily bad. I just didn't think it was very good. I don't know. I didn't mind Edward Furlong in the lead. I did like the way they ended it. I liked that.
What, where he gives the copy of Brainscan to the teacher?
Yes, because that teacher was really making me mad earlier in the movie, comparing horror movies to, like, rape.
Oh, yeah.
You are an insane person, and I hope the trickster kills you. Now, that didn't happen, but, I mean, he is going to go through some grief, which I thought was very rewarding at the end. But, yeah, in all honesty, I don't know, maybe I just wish it was, like, a worse made film, like, with really cheesy acting and like just really bad, and then I might have had more of a fun time with it. Where as it stands, I don't think 5 out of 10 is a bad rating. I mean, I think it's it's exactly in the middle. Not necessarily good, not necessarily bad. Just it's there.
So you're saying it's no Crazy Fat Ethel 2?
No, I'm afraid not. I mean, you guys know my taste in film, so...
I want that CD-ROM! That's what Ethel would say.
Well, I mean, she would want the food. I mean, any food that is near the house, I think
She'd
that's
probably
what...
eat that big chicken like Trickster did, which was gross.
Or the hot dogs and bananas chopped up.
Oh.
And like you guys said, it's not really necessarily sci-fi. I don't know why I kind of lump it in there, but I don't know. I just kind of did. My apologies for not being a bigger fan. I'm sorry.
No problem. Meep, you said you have more to say on the movie.
Yeah, I wanted to defend something you guys brought up about Michael, as we tend to do. The spying of the next door neighbor. Can I just say, yes, he does spy on his neighbor, but it's
teenagers do this kind of thing, okay?
Yes, teenagers do this kind of thing, but then it's also revealed later in the film that she is actually also spying on him.
Yeah, but she's not spying on him in the nude.
Well...
she's spying on him in private time while he's reading his Fango issues.
And that, which leads me to, like, the character itself. Like, he has a voice-operated computer, which dials phone numbers, all that great stuff, that all that technology in the 90s that we didn't quite have in real life, but we wanted to, aspire to. He had Fangoria magazines everywhere. He had VHS tapes. He brings VHS tapes to school. He shows his classmates horror movies. I might have been guilty of this as well as the person who brings the VHS tapes to school. He has, lots of phones, lots of CDs, CD-ROMs. He has a moped. He has a big house. He has absent parents. He has a cute girl next door who's actually into him. Why doesn't he?
Why doesn't he crack a smile? I mean, if he has all that, I'd be, very cheery.
Well, I know. He's absent. He has an absent father and no mom.
It's very Cats in the Cradle.
I mean, I didn't grow up with my mother passed away when I was younger too, so there was definitely that element which I related to him as well, and I could see where some of the grief and why it led him to being kind of more of a morose character, and why Edward Furlong played it that way instead of a cheery character. That makes sense to me. It doesn't quite always make for a good movie character playing the morose thing, and I think a lot of horror movies of the last 10, 20 years really have made this mistake of making their characters morose, so you can't really get into them as much. It's not a good entry point for a character when they're always seem depressed, and especially when they're living such a lavish lifestyle. But yeah, I understand why they also played it that way as well.
Mm. So will we move on to some behind the scenes?
Yes.
Justin, since you're all about research.
Oh, yes.
Well, tell us about your research.
Okay, well, Brainscan was a movie from 1994 starring Edward Furlong. I do actually I have done some research. The film, we didn't actually get, it got the kind of mix of good and bad reviews that you would expect from a horror movie back then. There's just a splattering of comments from a few reviews. The Baltimore Sun said Edward Furlong is so transparent and listless, he seems more like ectoplasm than the real live boy. It said T. Ryder Smith made me sick. It should have been called Brain Scam. So, but the Dallas Morning News said, to the extent that this movie plays with the idea, fear that the game unleashes the evil already dwelling in Michael, Brainscan succeeds in conjuring a genuine edginess. So that got a good review. Kevin Thomas in the Los Angeles Times tended to stick up for horror movies, and he did for this one as well. He said it set up expertly and certainly does supply its own jolt. Although it's more ambitious and intelligent than most teen horror flicks, it could use a lighter touch. A couple of others, the Night Ridder newspapers, wherever that is, said the makings of a good idea. Unfortunately, they don't make much out of the interesting and topical issue they raise. And the last one is from the Rocky Mountain News. The story revolves around a trick that turns the movie into a major cop-out, the last thing you want from genuine horror. So some of the some of the other reviews I found were kind of compared it to Nightmare on Elm Street. The Berkshire Eagle said, as an imitation, it is remarkably dull, uninteresting and derivative. But I did find a rave review in the Missoulian by critic Susanna Sonnenberg, who said, this B-movie is utterly gloriously driving. You may never actually be scared, but you don't want to leave your car until the intermission either. The game is too much fun. So, it definitely got a kind of mixed reviews. But then, like you say, most horror movies do get mixed reviews. So, so Erik, I did do my research, so I'd be interested to see what you have.
Well, I'm going to go hand over to Meep next. Meep, do you have any background for us?
Let's see. Like I said, it was set in New Jersey. It's supposed to be a variation of Montclair and other months, but definitely filmed in Canada. I love Canadian horror movies, so that really stuck out to me. Director John Flynn. He was an unusual choice for director of this movie. He directed some pretty muscular action movies like The Outfit, Rolling Thunder, that same one that Quentin Tarantino named his production company after, Defiance, bestseller, Lockup, the Stallone movie, and Out for Justice, the Steven Seagal Brooklyn action movie, which actually was on the set for a little bit when they were filming. I got to see John Flynn direct somebody, but he was an unusual choice for definitely a teen horror movie. But
didn't he direct Good Night, God Bless, which was a slasher film? I think he did.
I think that might have been him. I didn't write that one down, but for considering his action pedigree, it was kind of an unusual choice. The commentary on the Blu-ray is actually the director's son, who shares a lot of personal stories about his dad. So if those who want to hear more about John Flynn as a director and a person, you can listen to the commentary on the Scream Factory disc. It was written by Andrew Kevin Walker, who made who made a big splash in the 90s with Seven, and he wrote the screenplays for other movies like 8mm, Sleepy Hollow, The Wolfman, and more recently The Killer. But again, I wrote down, more importantly, Hideaway. A movie that time has definitely forgotten, but I like it. I enjoyed it a lot. The director of photography, Francois Protot, shot a couple of movies that I really enjoy, including The Kiss from 1988, the horror movie, the Canadian horror movie that needs more love, and Weekend at Bernie's. Very random.
Wow. Ooh.
And then after this one, he went on to do Johnny Mnemonic, which was a very tech-driven movie. Also, the composer, Georges Clinton, who I think did a really good job with the score. He's actually on the Blu-ray as well, being interviewed, and he seems very proud of his score. And I agree with him there. He did. He has a lot of credits. He has like over 100 credits. But highlights for me include The Boys Next Door, Avenging Force, which is a great movie. Hard Promises, Mother's Boys, Hellbound, which was a fun Chuck Norris movie. Austin Powers, he's responsible for the scores of that. And Wild Things, which has a great score as well. The makeup effects guy was Steve Johnson. He was responsible for a lot of that stuff we probably didn't see in the movie that got deleted. He has a funny story on the Blu-ray where he talks about how he and the other makeup effects guy basically got arrested for this movie because they were, they went up to Montreal and got caught up in customs with all their makeup supplies, and one of them confessed, saying that they were there for a movie. The other one held true to his convictions of saying that it was just there for. They were just there to have just for fun or whatever, and so they had contrary stories, and they ended up in jail for a night, or the detention center for a night for Brainscan, which is kind of funny. So he had a sense of humor about that experience, and of course, Steve Johnson has been responsible for a lot of great horror things. Edward Furlong, we know his career. Frank Langella, I think he's a little bit wasted in the movie. I think he could have had a more dynamic character. I'd like T. Ryder Smith a lot. I think he's really fun in the movie. And one of the other things I wanted to point out, what was playing in theaters at the time, because I like doing that. Just so you know, 1994 wasn't the greatest time for horror movies, so there's not a lot of horror movies playing. I wrote down Serial Mom, which we love, Leprechaun 2, Surviving the Game was a fun movie. Kronos was playing at the time. And then a lot of other things that were playing were just like movies like Bad Girls, Reality Bites, and Backbeat, Hudsucker Proxy, and Bitter Moon. So not a lot of horror, and I think horror was kind of a little bit at a point where it needed to be revived, and we know that's what happened a couple years later with Scream and all the post-Scream.
I was about to say, at least it wasn't 1995. That was the pits as far as the 90s is concerned.
1993 to 96, I was living right next door to a multiplex because I was in university in Dublin, and of course it would coincide with the barren years for the horror film. So I did see a lot of like Hudsucker Proxy and Backbeat, which are good movies, but I probably would have been happier if it was wall-to-wall horror. Is that all, Meep?
Yeah, take it away, Erik.
Okay, so this was filmed in Montreal, as you said, in Canada for 9 weeks. Now, the computerized effects, the CGI and all that were created by a guy called Art Durinsky and Renee Dalder. That's the director of 1976's Massacre at Central High. So, so he was working in the effects department at this stage, but he was also going on to make a film called Ecophoria that was going to be the first film to use virtual sets, which he thought, because he was an environmentalist, he thought this is a great way to cut down on waste. So I don't know if that film ever got made. I think I had a quick look to see if it did, and it didn't. Nothing came up. But the rumoured budget for the film was 6 to 8 million, and its box office gross was 4.3 million, which probably explains why we didn't see it in the UK and Ireland in cinemas, because it opened in the US on April the 22nd, 1994, so it is actually literally near its 40th anniversary, but it debuted at number 10 in the box office. The original script that Andrew Kevin Walker wrote in 1987 didn't have the trickster in it, or trickster, I should say. That was something that was added in by sort of further rewrites. I find it strange that he, like, 1 year his film Brainscan is in cinemas, the next year he's, been laden down with awards for his work on Seven. They seem like chalk and cheese, those films, really. But there's a nice interview with him on that Blu-ray Meep. Did you watch it? Where he's like so appreciative of the sort of leg up the industry that he got with Brainscan, and he says that, like, if that was the beginning and an end of his career, he would have been so proud just to be able to say, I had a script made into a film that made it into theaters. So yeah, he has loads of like really positive things to say. He's not one of these artists who are like suddenly they have all these award-winning scripts and they don't want to talk about their humble beginnings, whereas he's quite open about it, which I thought was really refreshing and really nice to see. Edward Furlong appeared in an Aerosmith video, and you can see Aerosmith posters in this movie for their album Get a Grip. And Edward Furlong is in a video for one of the singles taken from the album called Living on the Edge. Now here's a possible blooper in the film is that the Fangoria magazine that the Brainscan ad is supposed to be in has got Total Recall on the cover, with the eyes popping out. And that's from August of 1990. So they're either reading an old issue and seeing it advertised in there, or else they've just got their timelines all screwed up, and because that's not a 1994 film.
Yeah, and that's the issue we just covered last month on Fangoria Flashback.
Oh, yes, because I remember there was all that, oh, look, Susie's on the cover, oh, look, Toya's on the cover, blah, blah, blah. As we usually do, don't we, Justin?
Every single fucking time, yes.
Wow. Harsh.
13 long years, yes.
Long years, yes. And the other thing that I was mentioning that, like, Edward Furlong gets kind of flack for this movie, and part of that was reading this quote from John Flynn, the director, who said that Eddie Furlong was a 15-year-old kid who couldn't act. You had to slap him awake every morning. I don't want to get into knocking people, but I was not a big Eddie Furlong fan. Now that goes against what he said in the Fangoria article when they were covering this film in 1994, where he says, working with Eddie Furlong was a really pleasant experience. Now, obviously, he's going to be saying that in publicity materials for the film, but at a later date he sort of said no, it wasn't a good experience. Edward Furlong had a lot of family troubles going on behind the scenes while this film was being made, and I think, I feel really sorry for him, because he's just one of those child actors who sort of rose to fame a bit too quickly, probably, and
he got caught up in drugs and stuff as well, badly. He had to go to rehab like several times. I think he's doing pretty well for himself now. He's certainly
I follow
acting
him on
again,
Instagram, and he's doing he does a lot of conventions with people like who played the T-1000 in Terminator 2. What's his name?
Robert Patrick.
Robert Patrick, yeah, he does a lot of conventions with him and Michael Biehn and people like that. So, yeah, he seems to be doing okay. Oh, yeah, and he put up a post recently how he's 5 years sober. So, hopefully things are on the way up for him. Because I remember him being really great fun in that John Waters film, Pecker. If anyone has anyone seen Pecker recently?
Pecker's great. Yeah, I love Pecker.
You have.
Full of grace. So Nathan, do you have any background for us?
Well, by astonishing coincidence, everything you guys have read, I had already written down in the exact same order.
Knock me down with a feather.
I know.
It's like we've been pulled into an interactive video game, isn't it?
No, well, actually, I tell you what, guys, the trickster showed up and said that he would scan my brain if I tried to research. So,
okay,
what do you want me to do?
Joseph, I imagine you probably had the same experience as Nathan?
No, actually, I do have some background.
Well, thanks for making me look bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, just to correct myself, John Flynn did not direct Goodnight, God Bless. I don't know where I got that from. It must have been a Facebook thing. I don't know. But some stuff from T. Ryder Smith's casting as Trickster. He was given audition sides from an early draft of the script, and he said that he thinks that Trickster in that version was just supposed to be a disembodied voice. And so he went into the audition not really knowing how to play this. And he made a faux pas when he first got there. He spoke to the receptionist at the LA casting, and he said, "I'm here to audition for Brainstem rather than Brainscan." And she kind of smiled politely and waved him on in. And he said he was kind of deflated during the audition because the LA casting was a lot different than anywhere else. They would more or less watch the monitors more than they would him. Also, he provided the Igor voice, which is that telephone thing that Master is busy. They were trying to find an actor to cast for that, and he was already doing makeup. And he said, "Hey, I'm here. I'm a voice actor. I'll do it." And so he did 3 different versions of the Igor voice. He did Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and Peter Lorre. And they settled on the Boris Karloff voice, which they liked. And so he is also Igor in the movie. And not a lot of people knew that until he announced it on his website, I guess. But that's all I have.
One thing I was going to mention that I forgot to mention was that there was an interview. It was actually the first mention of the movie was in November 1993. And I think there was an interview with Edward Furlong, and he's talking about the movie. He was very excited to be in it. But it also mentioned that he'd nearly topped the Japanese charts with his debut album. But he said he threw away his copy. He said he was more into hardcore metal kind of guy. So I'm kind of presuming they somehow, he made an album probably of syrupy kind of love songs that hit the charts.
Look up the song. I think it's called When the Sun Goes Down. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I see that.
It's terrible.
Cool. So, what was the consensus on the Facebook page, or social media pages in general?
Yeah, so 31 comments for Brainscan. Not bad. Sam Hart says, Edward Furlong's magnum opus, my current favorite movie to watch on Halloween. One of my absolute favorites. My other favorites include Houseboat Horror, so I don't know what that says about me. And Dave Felter writes, Brain Dead. And that's it.
Ooh.
So I guess he just was not a fan of Brainscan.
Not a fan, no.
Yeah. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date on all that we're doing. Listen on Amazon, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and about 1 billion other podcatchers, both good and terrible. Join us on Patreon for as little as $1 per month to help support the show. Or if you're financially inclined, select a tier that fits your budget for that extra monthly bonus content. That's patreon.com/The Hysteria Continues, all one word. And that goes for our email address as well, thehysteriacontinues@gmail.com. Justin?
Okay, well, just to say, we just done commentary for, what was it, the Last Slump? No, Last Slump Party.
Boarding House.
Boarding House,
Boarding
of course.
House, of course.
Yes, we did do the Last Slump Party a little while ago. So, which, of course, if you have picked up the Blu-ray of the Last Slump Party and you're missing our commentary, you can always play it along with it. And Boarding House was a lot of fun. We've had some good feedback on that one. And the next one we're covering this month, well, for release later in the month, is Humongous. So that's kind of tier B, I kind of guess, slasher movie from Paul Lynch, director of Prom Night. So that should be a fun one to do. So join us over on Patreon. But yes, talking of not so much fun things, I got Erik's Joke of the Week coming up.
It's my joke of the week. It's so freaking fantastic.
Why was the Brainscan game rated X? Because it was a CD-ROM. CD.
Oh my God.
S-C-E-D-Y. It was a CD-ROM. No, that's good.
A lot better.
No, it's good.
No, that's terrible, Erik.
It's CD. Okay, will we move on to feedback? Because I've got to go to work.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so this is from David T. He says, "Hi, gents. Just a belated email to say congratulations on reaching both your 13th year and your 300th episode. Both highly impressive milestones and a testament to how good THC still is, even after all this time. I've tried numerous other podcasts over the years and nothing comes close to THC for the perfect blend of humour, info production and that special ingredient that I think is the relationship between the hosts. Having a cheeky glance behind the bloodstained curtain, have you chaps ever thought about I keep saying THC, about a Hysteria Continues get-together in the flesh? I know there are quite a few miles between you, but a live podcast of the Hysteria Continues meetup would be a fun listen. Lastly, a thank you for all the many hours of fun you've provided. After 13 years and being of similar age to you guys, it seems like we've all moved into middle age together. Here's hoping in the years to come we can all become grumpy old men and creaky old queens as a group too. From David T. Well, David, in terms of us all getting together in the flesh, it sounds fun, but none of us have any money.
We are still waiting, hanging out, or holding out for that mysterious millionaire that's going to pay for us all to get together and then kill us off one by one. Are you a
mysterious millionaire?
I wish I had Michael's money in life with his house.
I know. I want that bedroom. It needs more daylight, that bedroom, for my personal tastes. But otherwise, it was pretty cool.
Yes, I guess if you're a mopey teenage boy, it works, doesn't it? But maybe one day we'd like to meet up in the flesh. But
Justin will have to invite us to his island.
That makes me sound like a Bond villain.
Okay, we've also got a voicemail from Jay Yospa, who is a friend of the podcast. Here we go.
Hey, Hysteria Continues. It's Jay, the Haunt Cub. Been a long time since I've sent a voice message or any type. Of course, I still listen to every podcast. And I do have to tell you that actually you guys have steered me in the direction of many good movies, because although I've seen my fair share of slashers, they've been mostly the mainstream ones, and I have not seen a lot of the more obscure ones and only a handful of giallis. So that's why I really don't comment terribly often on the shows, because in a lot of cases I have not seen the movies yet. Anyway, I was recently at a Monster Mania this past weekend, and I got a poster signed by a couple of the folks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, Tom Atkins, Stacey Nelkin, and Dick Warlock. And it made me think that I hadn't messaged you guys in a long time, so I figured I'd drop a line. Anyway, I got a really strange sort of backhanded compliment from Dick Warlock. He said that I reminded him of a younger, better-looking Sid Haig. Not sure how to take that. I guess it's the shaved head and the beard. I don't know. I wasn't wearing any clown makeup or anything like that. A couple little things I just wanted to tell you that I thought were kind of interesting. First of all, I found out that my dad's cousin, whose name was Avery Shriver, he was an American actor, and I, as a kid, mostly knew him as the Dorito guy from the commercials. But he played Sergeant Manny Ruggin in Silent Scream, which I have actually not seen, but now I'm going to see if I can try to find. Also, I found out that a friend of mine who I met through my now partner, she actually posed for the artist who created the first Nightmare on Elm Street poster. She was actually the model for Heather Langenkamp for that movie, which I found kind of interesting. And now when I look at the poster, I can kind of see her face as a younger woman in it. So, but I was kind of blown away by that. Also, a little while ago, you guys were talking about the Hell House LLC movie. And I didn't know if you knew this or not, but there's actually a haunted attraction that takes place in that location. Excuse me. That's been there for quite a few years. And it's called the Waldorf Estate of Fear. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of fun to walk through that house after having seen all the movies. I still think the original was quite well done, especially for a super low budget. The sequels and the prequel were not quite as good, but I still love the original. And then the only thing I had was I was curious, Justin, if you have ever seen the show Los Spookies. It's on HBO Max. It had 2 seasons, and it's really quite bizarre and funny. So I thought you might want to check that out if you get a chance. Also, I went into an quote-unquote Irish store when I was on a long weekend in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I happened to pick up some chunky Kit Kats. I had never had them before. They are definitely different from the U.S. version, and I have to say that they are superior in taste. Anyway, boys, keep up the great work. Love the shows. Take care, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Well, thank you, Jay, for that, and enjoy those chunky Kit Kats. They are delicious.
The whole time he was talking, all I could think was Ricola, because he kept coughing and clearing his throat. I was going to offer him a cough drop. I realized it was a voicemail. So,
well, that's the trouble with voicemails, isn't it? Once you start, you can't stop. But no, thank you, Jay. I haven't heard of that series, so I will look that up on HBO Max. Or elsewhere. So, thanks for the tip. And also interesting trivia there for people having a relative that was in Silent Scream, and also the original model for Heaven Langenkamp in Nightmare on Elm Street. So presumably that was the one of the US poster. So yeah, great trivia there. So no, thanks for phoning in. So anyone else who wants to ring in, then obviously we do love hearing things. Didn't we have one guy who used to phone in and tell us about what he did in the gym?
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah, a long time ago, yeah.
Yes, so I know. Anyway, Erik, I know you have to rush off, and I'm being told I need to get out of my father's study. So the joys of visiting relatives. But thank you, Meep, for joining us as ever.
Thank you, Meep. Yes.
Is there anything you want to tell us about you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, because the Retro Movie Love podcast has come to a sad conclusion.
Yeah, I wrapped it up after 10 full years of doing Retro Movie Love, and I plan on getting a podcast going in a similar vein, but with a focus on more of a genre, hopefully later this year. So,
excellent. We'll look forward to that. And what are we covering next time? Whose choice is it?
It's mine.
Oh yes.
So Brainscan sort of deals with an absent father. So our next feature deals with one who should have been absent, and we're covering 1987's thriller slasher The Stepfather, and we'll be joined by guest Austin Stenberg, who chose it.
Excellent. Okay, fantastic. Well, nice segue into that. So excellent. Well, thank you for listening. And Erik, what are we playing out with? Which Edward Furlong song are we playing out with?
Well, if I'd known that...
Pitch Shifter Triad.
Maybe I should play an Edward Furlong song. I was going to play...
there you go.
I was going to
play... When the sun goes down.
Yeah, I was planning to play... Turn Off Your Brain and Yell by Suede, but I might change that to an Edward Furlong song if we can track one down. I'm sure there must be one on YouTube.
They're on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Excellent.
we're gonna play out with some Edward Furlong classic.
Oh my
track.
God.
Excellent. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, thank you for listening to Hysteria Continues, and we'll catch you next time. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Ciao.
So long.
Bye.
When the sun goes